Hey guys, I'm Complexity QXC. Today I'm going to be doing a little tutorial video to try and help you guys deal with Terrans, help Terrans deal with splash damage in the mid and late game. And hopefully for non-Terran players, kind of what you should be looking for when you want to take an engagement, if your opponent is in a good position or not. So this is all assuming you're playing Bio. The biggest threat to Bio in almost every game, in almost every matchup, is splash damage. Things like Banelings, High Templar Storm, and Colossus shots are probably the three biggest ones. Tank splash is also an issue, but it's a mirror matchup, so I'm not going to talk as much about that. And basically there's a couple ways you can approach splash damage to help reduce its effectiveness and make your army just a little bit stronger in general. So the first step is to figure out where the battle is going to happen. Once you know where the battle is going to happen, you can start setting up your units in the correct position and splitting them appropriately. And I have some clips that I'm going to show you that hopefully will illustrate that a little bit better. But in terms of forcing a battle to happen where you want it to, or at least predicting that it will, is you want to control important locations on the map. Generally just the fastest route from your base to his base, and also the most central route. When those two kind of connect, that's usually the most important, one of the most important points on the map. If you control some area like that, then you're almost certain to get a battle to happen. Also, if you can threaten one of your opponent's expansions, you basically say, you will either fight me or I will destroy this base. And then you can generally force a battle. So one example of just a very central location that you can control in order to force a battle is the middle watchtower on Frost. So I have a clip here I want to show you guys. And so this is from a relatively recent TVP. So a couple things to note is I'm not going to be pushing my army into his army. I'm going to kind of establish a concave here and hold that position. So I push up a little bit because he's falling back, but notice at this point, instead of continuing to pursue, I hold my position and then I fall back. And I'm not falling back with the whole army. When you group your whole army and move it backwards, it tends to clump up a lot, and you have a lot of wasted damage output. All those Marines that don't need to be moved, that are being moved, are not contributing to the overall damage output of your army. So you only really want to move the stuff that's taking damage. You can notice the stuff that's really up close is where you want to back up, and anything that's under threat of a storm. And then from there, it's continuing to split to pull parts of the army back, kind of making that concave. You're always looking to get an arc, and that arc is very important for spreading your units out so that you're not just eating big storms, big Colossus shots, while also keeping them close enough that they're all contributing to damage together. And it also keeps the surface area of your army relatively low, which helps minimize the amount of damage you'll be taking from melee units such as Zerglings and Zealots. So I have another clip here. This is going to be for Terran versus Zerg. We're going to look at versus Muta Ling Bling. And here we go. Okay, so in this example, I'm basically baiting my opponent to attack me in two ways. One, I'm on creep, kind of. I'm kind of like the frontmost part of my army is definitely very much on creep. The backmost is ready to get off of creep, but I am threatening this base, this fifth base. Okay. So a couple things to note is notice how my army is already spread out. This is probably the most important part is, well, it looks great when you split the moment the battle starts. It's incredibly inefficient and it's very difficult. It's much easier to split your army out beforehand. So you figure out where the battle is probably going to happen and you concave around it before it actually starts. So you can see my army here is already split around, and that's great. And again, I'm only going to be moving back the units that are being directly threatened. And that's really important to make sure that you get the damage output you need to really take these fights. One other thing to consider here is this technique will not work. You cannot take an impossible battle and turn it into a possible battle. So what I mean by that is if your opponent has twice the supply of you, they have 2 upgrades above you, things like that, like splitting and concaving, doing these things will not make you win the fight. But this will take fights where the supplies are relatively even, where the army composition is relatively even, and it will turn them in your favor. It will add just a little bit of longevity because your units will not be taking so much splash damage when you pre-split and only move the units that are really taking damage, and it will increase your overall damage output compared to taking your whole army and trying to kite and move back and move back. Sometimes that is what you want to do, but for most of these big fights when you're getting close to max out, it's really not. You're losing far too much damage output when you do it that way and keeping your army too clumped up. Okay, and I do have one more clip. This one is against Zerg again and Muta Ultralisk Speedling Baneling. So let's take a quick look at that. So again, this is on the defensive, and basically I'm poking in to try and get my opponent to attack me, but notice how much my army is spread out already. Even these units in the front, these are kind of like the sacrifice. They're still spread out, so hopefully some splash damage will hit them that would otherwise be hitting a big group of units. But they're not so far away that basically if my opponent starts attacking these units, everything else can come in and help. So notice here I'm going to stim and I hold position. Notice I'm not stimming and A-moving into this army. I want to maintain my split, my concave, but I definitely want to stim. You absolutely have to. You need that extra damage output. So everything's staying in place. And notice how the Banelings are just kind of feeding into my army. A big part of them blow up on some Marauders. And in general, this battle, which looks like it may have been almost impossible to win if it was, let's say, out in the middle of the map on creep, if I was all bunched up, actually goes quite in my favor. And that had mostly to do with the pre-splits, and then when the battle actually begins, I'm not A-moving into him, I'm stim, hold position, let the medevacs heal me up, let my opponent come to me, let him attack into my good position. I do not need to bunch my army up and put it into his wherever he wants the battle to happen. So basically, just to summarize, when you're having these big engagements, you want to figure out where the battle's going to happen, pre-split, make a big concave around where your opponent will be approaching from, and then when the battle begins, you're not going to grab your whole army and stutter step and A-move back. You just spread it out, and whatever's taking a lot of damage, whatever's immediately being threatened by splash damage, you're going to take that and pull it back and let everything else keep attacking. You have to make sure when you set up in this position and you're getting ready to commit to the fight that you can commit to the fight, and that's a difficult skill. It'll be hard sometimes to estimate whether or not you can win the fight, but usually if you're maxed and you have your almost all of your army there, you should be able to take most fights. Unit composition is important. So these micro techniques will not fix your unit composition, they will not fix bad macro, but they will help in actually taking those fights when all else is equal, in making your army just a little bit more efficient. I'm Complexity QXC. This has been Micro Tips and Tricks. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.